And hello, everyone, and welcome to Rich Sports Talk. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. And Giants fans, I apologize about the delay for this. Look, it has just been a crazy week for me with covering the draft, work, but I finally have a chance to do the reaction to the New York Giants draft. And this is an opinion that I'm pretty strong about. And I've been saying a lot about the Giants draft in a couple mock drafts to the Giants. And look, this was an important mock draft. I mean, we talk about the Jets draft on this channel a lot. We talk mostly a lot about the Jets, but the Giants are do take up a good portion of my content. And I also feel like they they are a team in New York that has a huge impact, and I want to be a part of talking about them. And look, either way you slice it, both the Jets and the Giants have basically been in similar boats the last 5 years. They've been going through quarterbacks, they've been trying to rebuild, they've been trying to get the process going now. The Giants, with a fresh restart, Joe Shane, the new GM for the Giants, Brian Dable, the new head coach. And coming into this draft, I said, look, this is probably going to be very Buffalo Bills-esque. They're probably going to be looking to build up the trenches, build the offensive line, because when you look at when the Bills started with Josh Allen, they really focused on a lot of the trenches in the draft, but they also very frugal in free agency. They were very smart with how they spent their money in free agency, how they attacked the offensive line. But the Giants, unfortunately, because of the contracts given out by Dave Gettleman, they didn't have the flexibility in free agency. And you could tell this team is still hamstrung by Dave Gettleman, which is also something I have to talk about when I give this draft analysis, because it's clear that the Giants are still being hampered because of their really tight cap situation with some of the moves that they made, which I questioned during the draft, especially day 2 and day 3. But overall, I thought the Giants had a very good draft. And it was an interesting draft, too, because one of the big things coming into this draft was, would the Giants pick at 5 and 7? Would they trade out at 7? What would they take at 5? And a lot of the speculation was, would Kayvon Thibodeau end up to them? Because there was a lot of talk Kayvon Thibodeau was going to the Jets at 4. We heard as high as the Lions at 2. Would they be able to get an elite pass rusher if Kayvon wasn't there? Would it be Trayvon Walker? Would they be interested in Jermaine Johnson? And what offensive lineman would fall to them? Would Ike Ekwonu fall to them? Would Evan Neal fall to them? I remember the first mock draft I did for the Giants, which was crazy. And I believe I had them picking both Evan Neal and Tyler Linderbaum. And people are saying why that's crazy. I said, look, the Giants' weakest unit on their entire team is the offensive line. And this entire next season for the Giants, like, they've made it clear. Now, I'm not, when I say this, I'm pretty sure this is coming from ownership, but they want to give Daniel Jones a fair opportunity. They want to give Daniel Jones as much opportunity in the world as they possibly can. I don't necessarily agree with that, but they're going to try to make it work, and they're trying to make it work with Saquon. If you're going to do that, you need to heavily invest in the offensive line, and they did that. So the Giants had an unbelievable first night of the draft, because they walked away with what many people were saying could be the best pass rusher in the draft in Kayvon Thibodeau. And the Giants' defense, for as good as it's been the last couple of years, really has lacked a dynamic pass rusher. And in some regards, I actually think Kayvon was a better fit for the Giants than he was the Jets. And let me explain. The Giants are, from all indications, are still going to run more of a 3-4 defense, or if they have the 4-down lineman, they're going to run like the wide 5 technique or the wide 9. Sorry about that. And because of that, Kayvon, to me, I always kind of projected me. I felt like he might be better up as like a stand-up edge rusher in a 3-4. He kind of fits that mold a little bit better. So I thought that would be a good fit for the Giants. They end up getting him with a dynamic pick. They get a dynamic edge rusher, which many people believe could be one of the best ones in the draft. They didn't have questions about him. And Kayvon was really a polarizing prospect, not just because of his endorsement deals, but really there was no consensus on him. You had people with a range on him saying that he was the best pass rusher in this draft. You had people saying there were pass rushers like Jermaine Johnson better than him. Like, there really wasn't a good consensus on Kayvon, but he goes to a team where I also believe, too, they have a good infrastructure on the defense where they don't necessarily need him year one to get 10 or 12 sacks. They have some good pieces. They still have Leonard Williams. They have some decent edge rushers. They have a good secondary. I mean, this Giant defense has been their strength the last 2 seasons. I mean, let's Let's be honest. It's been the best part about their team has been their defense, and they're just adding to it. And he brings a new sense of ability to that defense. And I'm really excited what he does. But the more I thought about the draft, and I would love to hear the opinions of Giant fans, because when I looked back at this draft, yeah, it was great for the Giants in the first round, but a part of me wonders who was the number one tackle on their board. If Icky was the number one tackle on their board, and again, I understand that the thinking probably was this is what I believe they were thinking. Okay, we get Kayvon at 5. We're getting one of the top 2 tackles, regardless at 7. But if they really believed Icky was far and away the best player on the board, I'm curious to see, like, did they really think a team was going to trade up to 6? Because the Panthers weren't going to take an edge rusher at 6, and I really didn't see a team coming up for Kayvon. So part of me will look back on this draft, and especially if Icky becomes the better tackle prospect, I will always wonder, did the Giants maybe screw this up a little bit where they could have probably gone the number one tackle? Either way, like, I'm not trying to discourage the Evan Neal pick. That was a great pick. And what I believe happened was they looked and said, look, either way, we're coming away with a top 2 tackle. Neal gives them versatility. Neal becomes an instant day one starter at the right tackle spot. You have your 2 bookend tackles, hopefully for the next 10 years. But a part of me always wonders, and like, I know everyone was praising the first round for getting those 2 premium players, but a part of me kept nagging at me was, could they've gone Icky and Kayvon potentially? Like, that was really what I was wondering. But overall, I thought they had a great first night with the draft. What happened with the Giants, though, which really intrigued me, was day 2 and day 3, because I think they hit a home run on the first night of the draft, getting probably one of the best pass rushers and tackles. But then the finances really came into play for the Giants, because the Giants had one of the top picks at the top of the second round. And I'm thinking, okay, they moved back from 4 to 43. They could have maybe had Mckeithen, a pass rusher, but they probably were a little past the pass rusher. Bull Mafi, they probably weren't interested in Kenneth Walker, but Andre Booth was still on the board. There were still some good, interesting players that I really liked. And then they traded back to 43 for Wan'Dale Robinson, the wide receiver out of Kentucky. Now, a couple of things before I get to the player. It was clear that the Giants were trading down a lot, and it became apparent that one of the reasons for all the trade downs was this team, because they don't have the finances in free agency, like, they needed enough bodies in this draft where they felt that they had to get so many picks to fill out this roster, because they weren't going to be able to bring in even low-level free agents because they're so up against the cap right now. But then the other part of me was thinking, I understand that, but in some regards, are they almost better off going the opposite way and trying to get maybe 2 or 3 less players, but trading up to get maybe higher value in the draft? But I am really curious to see what happens with Kadarius Toney in training camp, because I've always said on this show, GMs can tell you the press one thing, they can tell the fan base one thing, they can keep saying a bunch of things. But I've always been a proponent of that actions will always speak louder than words. And when it lead that they were considering moving off from Kadarius Toney, and of course they've backtracked that. In the second round, they drafted Wan'Dale Robinson. Now, this was kind of a theme for the Giants, but I almost felt like a lot of the receivers and the players that they were drafting, they kind of overdrafted, because I was sitting there 43 on, like, wow, they could get George Pickens, who's a player I think is really good, or Alec Pierce or Sky Moore. I mean, these are not only dynamic playmakers, but bigger outside receivers that actually I thought would fit nice. You have Galladay on one side, you compare one of them on the other side. And heck, even at 43, I thought the best direction for the Giants was actually Trey McBride. I know it was a little early because he didn't go till 55 with the Cardinals. But I was saying, look, get Daniel Jones a great security blanket at a tight end. And worst case scenario, you've got yourself a really good tight end if you move on to a future quarterback next year. So I was really surprised. And there's some other guys I really like too. Cameron Jergens, I understand that they have a center, but I really liked him as an interior offensive lineman. There was a lot of different directions I really thought the Giants were going to go. Even John Mechie, I know he's got some injury risk, but you saw him when Alabama in crunch time needed a play. He was their go-to receiver in crunch time. So they draft wan'dale Robinson, who basically fits the slot, plays the same position as Kadarius Toney, and it tells me that maybe they're not as sold on Toney as we think. In this offense, the slot is highly valuable because one of the biggest acquisitions to help Josh Allen in Buffalo, which really got overshadowed because of Stephon Diggs. The Stephon Diggs trade elevated Josh Allen. It elevated that offense. But one of the most underrated moves that the Bills made that really helped Josh Allen's development, and I truly believe this, was the addition of Cole Beasley. Beasley was not re-signed this year, but Beasley, when it was early in his career, was that valuable slot receiver because until Knox developed for Buffalo, Beasley was that go-to guy on third downs. When they needed a play, when they needed a conversion, he was the go-to guy. He was Josh Allen's security blanket. And this is an offense where Brian Daboll's coming from that really values reliable slot receivers. So Kadarius Toney, maybe they don't feel is a reliable option, and that's why they went up and got wan'dale Robinson. But it was just funny because the Giants just seem to be kind of stretching. Now, if we go back in 3 years and these guys panned out, that's brilliant for the Giants. But just looking where they were on my board, I mean, I have wan'dale Robinson as like a high 4th round pick, and they took him at 43 overall. I mean, I was just looking at some guys on the board. I really like George Pickens, Alec Pierce, Sky Moore, Trey McBride. If you want to go offensive line again, I really liked Cameron Jergens, who went to Philadelphia 51. There were some really interesting and good players on the board that I really liked, and they went receiver. And then they went to the 3rd round. Giants, of course, with a couple more trades. They ended up with 2 third-round picks. The first, of course, was Joshua Zedu, the offensive lineman from North Carolina. And I think he's going to compete for a starting job day one. I really liked him. Like wan'dale Robinson had a day 3 grade on him. But if they feel he's going to compete and be able to earn a starting job, and they end up, even with the 2 guards, it's like if they get 1 starting guard out of it to pair with Neal, let's be honest, this was a successful draft for the Giants. I mean, the Giants needed to invest in the offensive line. They need to upgrade the offensive line. They need to go out there and make sure to shore up this offensive line. Look, it was their biggest need without question, and they did address it in this draft. But it was another example where I looked at some other players on the board and I went, okay, but I mean, Chad Muma, Giants need a linebacker. He would have been an unbelievable linebacker. I mean, Jelani Woods, Christian Harris, an athletic linebacker from Alabama. Travis Jones, too, who I thought was going to be a late 1st-round pick, was sitting there. I thought Travis Jones would be a steal for the Giants. You put him at the nose tackle position. All of a sudden, that defensive front where you have in the middle Travis Jones, you have Leonard Williams, and then you have Kayvon coming off the edge. I mean, that could be an elite defensive making right there. But Giants, of course, went with Zedu. Then they went with Cordell Flott, the cornerback from LSU. I liked him. He's a slot corner. But it was kind of funny because after the draft, like I was saying this before the draft, I really felt James Bradbury would be dealt before the draft or during the draft. The Giants didn't deal him. And they have kind of a lot of slot corners already on the roster. So this one, another bit puzzling, but overall, I do really like his athleticism. I do think he's got a lot of upside. I think he's got more upside than Zedu does at 67. So I did like this pick. But the biggest thing in the 3rd round, and I'm going to be preaching probably to the choir a little bit here and probably going off a little bit, but I think the Giants made a massive mistake in the 3rd round because if I was the Giants, and you can put in the chat if you disagree, if you agree with me, if you think I'm an idiot, if you think I'm onto something here, please let me know in the comments. But here's what I'm thinking. If I was the Giants in the 3rd round, with all the quarterbacks falling in there, I would have tried to take at least one, and I probably would have taken Malik Willis because Malik Willis was available with both 3rd-round picks. Now, is there pressure from the Giants to make Daniel Jones work, especially from ownership? Could that have played a part in this? Sure. But there's a thing I keep seeing in the NFL that is a little bit troubling to me. And there's that old cliche of a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. And I kind of feel a lot of teams might have fallen into that trap because all I heard was, and I agree full-heartedly, next year's quarterback class is a lot better. There's no question. You have two guys at the top right now that look to be elite level prospects and probably two top 5 picks. And probably by the end of next season, we'll have at least 3 guys that we'll have a big 3. Maybe a fourth will kind of be like in the mix in the middle round, in the middle of the first round. But there's usually, like, in a really good quarterback class, maybe 3 that are really getting the hype train. There's only one problem with that, though, because I keep hearing, we can get a quarterback next year. We can get a quarterback next year. Oh, our team can get a quarterback next year. And I saw a couple teams that I think had that argument, but then went with a quarterback this year. Carolina and Atlanta were both examples in the third round, where both took a risk. But let's be honest, if you miss on a third round pick, does it hurt a bit? Yes. But the Giants also had the insurance of having a second, third round pick. And if you miss on a quarterback in the third round, it's not going to be that damning. But I just looked at it and said, okay, looking forward to next year's draft, how many teams are going to want one of these quarterbacks? Like, I'm saying 3. Like, I'm being generous if there's going to be 3, like in the top 5 that you believe are franchise quarterbacks. And that's a lot. But let's say that there's 3 for the sake of argument. How many teams are jockeying for position for next year? A bunch of teams already have multiple ones for next year. I mean, just in your own division, the Eagles have put multiple draft picks toward next year. They pretty much have told me they're not sold on Jalen Hurts, and I feel that they could move up and get a quarterback next year. That's just in the Giants division. But think about the NFC South. Yeah, the Panthers drafted a quarterback, but they might not love the quarterback and still move up. The same with the Falcons, the Saints. I mean, the NFC, you're looking right now, there's a lot of teams that could be looking to get up for a quarterback next year. And that doesn't even include the AFC teams that could potentially be looking to move up next year. So there's probably going to be 6 or 7 teams next year that want the quarterback, but there's only 3 available. And the Giants this year had a gluttony of picks. If they were really that desperate to get a quarterback for next year, and I think you saw in this draft, like, everyone wants the picks for next year. One of the reasons I think you saw a lot of trades in this draft is because no one was offering future picks. Like, if there was a lot of future picks in next year's draft, I think you would have seen a little bit more movement because it was just this draft. I don't think teams minded moving up and down this draft because they value next year's draft more. So if I was the Giants, I would have taken Malik Willis in the third round for a couple of reasons. The first reason is I think he's the one quarterback in this class that I could see being a game changer, because when I look for a quarterback in a draft, I want to see something that makes him stand out, like really that I see as an elite trait. And for him, it's his athleticism. He's the most athletic quarterback in this class. Like, Pickett is an underrated athlete, but I think the best his ceiling is like a Kirk Cousins. Like, Malik Willis, like, I understand, like, he needs to learn a playbook. He needs to develop as a passer. But we've seen a lot of these quarterbacks like a Kyler Murray, a Josh Allen, that maybe weren't refined passers, but could survive with their athleticism for the first year or two. And I just look at that athleticism for him. I would have taken a shot on him because, look, let's be honest, Daniel Jones, I think most of the fan base is already out on him. I think the Giants, the organization, maybe not the ownership, but the organization's pretty much telling you they're probably going to move on from him next year. So I would have taken a shot. I mean, the worst case scenario, you bring Malik Willis in, he doesn't work, you get a quarterback next year. Best case scenario, let's say that Malik Willis comes in, plays well, looks like your future quarterback, but you're not a great team. You could, if you finish in the top 10 for a draft pick and a team desperately needs a quarterback, you could get an absolute haul and, supercharge this rebuild with multiple picks. I mean, if I would have just taken a shot, like, I get taking a quarterback in the first round was a no-go for the Giants. The second round probably would have been a stretch. But when I'm seeing these quarterbacks sitting there in round 3, especially when the Giants have 2 third-round picks and multiple day 3 picks, I understand that there's a lot of needs. I understand that there's a lot of holes on this roster. But the quarterback is the biggest question in the Giants organization. I would have said take a shot on the lottery pick with Malik Willis, or maybe even if you like Matt Corral or you like Desmond Ridder, if you like one of these other quarterbacks, fine, all the power to you. But in that situation, I know there's no fifth year option, but if you hit on those quarterbacks, or if you think that there was any chance, I would have. I think the Giants organization, I'm curious to see because I think that they knew they were going in with Daniel Jones this year and they're trying to ride it out. But if I was the Giants, I would have taken a shot on Malik Willis because you don't have anything to lose. The best case scenario is you found a quarterback in the third round, and then you might have a lottery ticket next year to get you more multiple picks and supercharge this rebuild. But I just looked at it and went, man, like Malik Willis was there. Desmond Ridder was there. I mean, even with the second, third round pick, I mean, I know they weren't going to take Nakobe Dean, who I would have liked, but I know the injuries probably scared off the Giants. But I mean, Malik Willis was there. Matt Corral was there. Desmond Ridder went a couple of picks earlier at 74, but they could have got him at 67. Look, I would have taken a shot on a quarterback. I don't think Daniel Jones is a long-term answer. I know you brought in Tyrod Taylor, but if I'm the Giants, I would have just taken a shot. I would have taken a flyer. I mean, your franchise isn't going to fold if you missed on a quarterback in the third round. And really, Malik Willis was the only quarterback out in the top 50 on my entire board. Like, I think he's the only player in this draft that has the athleticism and the build to be a really effective NFL quarterback. I mean, the rest of the guys, I think, are going to be at the best really good game managers. I mean, Desmond Ridder is a really good athlete, but I just don't see him developing into that great of a passer. Malik Willis, I think, is a more athletic quarterback. I watched him at the Senior Bowl. He was like really the only one that stood out. And really, like, when you heard behind the scenes, you didn't love what they were saying about Pickett and how he was prepping and how he was learning offenses. You didn't love how Ridder was struggling with accuracy and consistency. I mean, look, Malik Willis, like, to me, was the one quarterback that even if he wasn't a great thrower, he has the athleticism to make enough plays to develop as a passer. And look, this offense really wants an athletic quarterback. I would have taken a shot. And that's part of the reason I factor that into my grading is I really think the Giants, when you don't have a quarterback, take a shot at a quarterback. But getting into the fourth round, Giants had two more picks. They get Daniel Bellinger, the tight end out of San Diego State. I liked it. I thought this was a solid pick. I also like the Dane Belton pick, the D-back. But for the tight ends, I kind of was, to be honest with you, it felt like another stretch for Bellinger. Like, I really like Charlie Collard, the Iowa State tight end. He went to Baltimore at 128. More athletic. I thought was a better guy that could stretch the field. There's another tight end that went in that round too. Isaiah Likely went after him. Like, I liked Likely. I liked also Ferguson as better tight ends. Like, look, if they hit on Bellinger, great. But I just looked, it was kind of one of those things with the receiver in round two. I'm like, okay, they've got the need, but was it the best player for that need? Then they went back to linebacker Mcfadden from Indiana. Now, this was probably my favorite day three pick. He's a great athlete, hyper athletic linebacker, could do a bit of everything. I really like this pick. Addresses the linebacker depth. DJ Davidson, defensive tackle, then followed up, who I think is a good player that he'll fill in around the depth. Then went back to North Carolina to get another running mate in North Carolina, Marcus Mckeithen. It'll be interesting to see. I think at best he's a backup offensive guard, but the Giants, they needed depth. And then they got Darian Beavers out of Cincinnati. I mean, they got a lot of athletic linebackers on this team now, so they addressed two of the needs. And look, they addressed the depth of the defensive on the lines, and this is really what the Giants need to do in this draft. Now, we'd love to get your reaction on the draft. Please post in the comments and the live chat what you thought. I mean, personally, I gave the Giants draft a B+. I think the first day they got an A+. Days 2 and day 3, like, look, I gave them a B+ because did the Giants address key needs? Yes. Did they fill out key positions? Yes. Did they address the depth where they really need depth, which was linebacker, defensive back, and offensive line? Yes, yes, yes. But the reason I gave it a B plus now, I just felt like with a couple of these picks, especially with the tight end, especially with the wide receiver, they kind of reach. Now, if it pans out, that's great for the Giants. But it just felt like there was a couple reaches on day 2 and day 3 that were a little bit puzzling. I'm not as day 3, not going to give them as much, but day 2 especially felt like a reach. And really, if I was the Giants, I would have drafted a quarterback. I would have tried to draft Malik Willis, especially when they were in the 3rd round. 2nd round, I get it. It's a bit high. And I understand too, like if you draft a quarterback, there's going to be a lot of media attention. Like, whoa, did the Giants get the attention? Like a replacement for Daniel Jones. And I know already, like in Tennessee, uh, there's already getting some pushback on the from Ryan Tannehill on the Malik Willis pick. I mean, he basically says he's not there to be his mentor, which I get, and I think that's almost a little bit overblown that people have been making such a big deal about that. But the Giants' biggest need is a quarterback. And you've looked at their division. I mean, their division, 2 of their biggest opponents in the division have either shorn up or believe they shorn up the quarterback position or have positioned themselves to get a quarterback next year. That was the Eagles with the trade with the Saints, getting more picks for next year's draft for a potential quarterback. And then you also look at what the Washington Commanders did, bringing in Carson Wentz. Now, do I think Carson Wentz is an elite quarterback? No, but now I do. I will say this, that the Giants have the worst quarterback in their division by a mile. So I don't see what the problem is taking one, especially when you have, if the Giants were limited on picks where they only had one pick on the entire day 2, and limited picks on day 3, then I would have said, you know what? Don't take the quarterback. But when you had 3 picks, including 2 in the 3rd round, when you had multiple picks on day 3, just take the shot at the quarterback. Worst case, it doesn't work out. I know that they might be afraid of stepping on Daniel Jones's toes, but look, Daniel Jones, like for a time, we didn't even know if he would play this year because of the neck injury. That was a serious neck injury, and we weren't sure how much he was going to play. So I just look at the Giants draft. I still think it was a very good draft. Trust me, it's a lot better than their past drafts, but the past drafts were just like infuriating, pull your hair out, and you're like, what are they doing? At least they had a plan here, and you could tell a lot of it was building up the trenches, putting a lot of depth in key positions. They want athletic linebackers, which is a staple of what they had in Buffalo. Hyper athletic linebackers that can really run. They value secondary members. They value trench play, especially on the defensive and offensive line. Like those were major investments for this Giant team this year. And I think that they did a very good job of addressing like key holes, because the offensive line, the Giants' hope is they got a starter in Neal. You're hoping one of those 2 guards, like not great, but just are starters. Like if one of those 2 guards is a starter this year and you've filled out 3 of the 5 spots, really, I think they've done enough patchwork to survive at guard, one of the guard positions in center this year. I still think it's a position that you're going to still need to upgrade next year as well, but at least you'll have some more cap flexibility and another draft to do that. But overall, I think the Giants defense got better. And let's be honest, that defense is going to have to carry them this year, because I'm concerned about this offense. I mean, we're talking about an offense that I understand Brian Dable is a great play caller, and I do think the offensive line is better. But there's a reason why the Giants were one of the worst offenses in football last year. It's because I don't think that their quarterback can stay healthy or make enough plays. But the biggest skill positions on the team, you have major question marks about. That was another critique I would have in this draft too, of one position I would have drafted beside the quarterback. I would try to get a running back. And I know it wouldn't have been a popular pick, but I was just looking kind of like in the 3rd round. I mean, I was wondering if maybe the Giants could grab a running back in the 3rd or the 4th round. Just seeing like Zamir White and Isaiah Spiller went in the 4th round after the Dane Belton pick. Because look, the Giants don't really have a great backup behind Saquon, and Saquon hasn't proven he can stay healthy. And if you really want to help Daniel Jones, having a consistent running game would really help. So the 2 biggest playmakers on this Giants offense, actually the 3 biggest playmakers, like let's be honest. If can they play even 13 games this year? Like Kenny Galladay's the best wide receiver weapon the Giants probably have. If you were to put money on it, like an over under, how many does he play over 13 games? I don't think people would feel comfortable taking the over. If I put the same mark on Daniel Jones, 13 games, I don't think people are comfortable. Saquon, the same thing. Do people feel comfortable he's going to play 13 or 14 games? I'm not sure. So the Giants got this defense a lot better. And look, their defense is going to have to carry them. I think they have the pieces to be a top 10 defense. I think that they have a good pass rush. They have a good defensive line. They got a lot of good athletes on the back end. I think this Giant defense could carry them and surprise people and win them a game or two that they're not supposed to. But the biggest thing coming into the season was the offense. And one of the draft tendencies I was a little surprised of is like, yes, they addressed the offensive line. And yes, they added a receiver in this draft and a tight end. But they really weren't exciting or really what you feel are difference makers right now. Like if this team had like an Alec Pierce or one of these bigger receivers on the outside with that second round pick, I'd feel a little bit better. But they added a receiver that pretty much plays the slot where Kadarius Toney plays. Is that telling you they don't believe in Kadarius Toney? I don't know. Like the Giants, the top two receivers, again, like you can throw Kadarius Toney into that bunch. Do they think he's going to be not only healthy but reliable? I mean, the best game he had as a Giant, he got thrown out of because he threw a punch against the Cowboys. I mean, he had a great 2-game span and then he fell off. So I'm curious to see what they did. And that's one of the criticisms I would have is, yes, they made this defense better. But if I was the Giants after the Kayvon pick, I would have tried to limit it to maybe 1 or 2 total defensive picks. And look, it's not wrong to improve this defense and get this defense better. But if I was the Giants, I almost would have looked at this and said, okay, we don't have a tight end. I wouldn't mind them even drafting 2 tight ends in a tight end deep draft. I wouldn't mind them drafting another running back, another receiver, more offensive linemen. Now, they did draft 3. They drafted 2 guards in the tackle. So I do think that they did address the offensive line, but you look at this league now, skill positions are becoming key and skill positions are becoming the difference makers. And I don't think the Giants really have skill difference makers. They have a couple, but you don't know how many games they're even going to play or how reliable they're going to be on. It's the 3 biggest playmakers on this team. I'll throw Daniel Jones in the mix. I'll make it 4 are Jones, Toney, Galladay, and Saquon. And you can't rely on them. You don't know how healthy they're going to be. Like if I was to say they played 13 games this year, you almost feel most Giant fans would be happy with that because they'd be like, well, at least they played 13 games this year. So like I just looked at this as an opportunity. Like I still think the Giants had a very good draft. I think that they addressed key needs. I think that they did a very good job, but I see a lot of people giving them an A. I think they did an A plus job in the first round, but days 2 and days 3, I thought there was a lot of reaches, and I felt like this offense was atrocious. Like this defense needed help, but the defense wasn't the biggest concern. It's not just helping this offense to make Daniel Jones work. It's more about putting pieces on this offense where if the Giants get to the end of next offseason and there's a disgruntled, really good quarterback in the AFC, the Giants look like an attractive place to play. Or if they're trying to draft a young quarterback, it's an attractive place to go to. Where right now, like, yeah, the offensive line's probably a little bit better, but going into next year, you'll have a question like, who are the Giants' top 2 receivers? Who are the Giants' number 1 running back? Like, I just looked at the second round, like Sky Moore, Trey McBride. They're guys I would have rather had on this team. George Pickens, Alex Pierce. I just think that they were better playmakers. And even in the next round, in the 3rd round, I still thought there's some really good tight ends that they could have gone with. Like even the 4th round, Isaiah Likely. I'm like, get Isaiah Likely, like really dynamic tight end, or Collar from Iowa State. I don't know how he got past the first 3 rounds and the Giants passed on them. Like they got a good tight end, a really good blocking tight end, but this team needs some dynamic players, and especially on the offensive side, I really think they got that. I really don't. And I also would have had another running back. I really would have, because I don't like the depth behind Saquon, and this team really, if they could establish a good running game, I think that would take a lot of pressure off Daniel Jones. I really do. I really think that would have been a really huge help for this team. But the Giants, though, I still thought had a good draft. I mean, B plus is still a really good draft. I think they got a dynamic player in round one. They got a great pass rusher. They got Evan Neal, who's going to be a day one starter. They have two bookend tackles now. And look, it's easier to fix the interior of an offensive line. It's easier to find a guarder and centers than finding tackles. And I think that they found two bookend tackles, which is what they really needed to come out of this draft with. They ended up getting, but I just feel like this draft, like, I hope that they hit on this draft. But for me, when I look at this draft, I feel there's a lot of missed opportunities. Like I've gone on about getting a quarterback in the third round. I think that was a missed opportunity. I think they missed on a couple of dynamic tight ends who I think could have been a little given a little bit more weapons to this offense. I would have tried to add another playmaker at wide receiver if I could have, even double dip at wide receiver. And personally, I would try to add a running back. I mean, I still think the Giants had a good undrafted free agency period. I think they got some really good depth pieces there, but it it just I just felt like the Giants, like, it was a very good draft. Like, that's the thing. Like, I'm trying to get across that I do think the Giants had a very good draft. Like, people are going to say, like, "Oh, I gave them a B plus. Oh, that's terrible. You think that that's a terrible draft?" No, I think it was a very good draft. I think it was a draft where, I mean, even outside an undrafted free agency, I mean, they got Christopher Hinton. I mean, I think he's a big 305 pounder. He could be a project at nose tackle. They grabbed another tight end, Austin Allen. I mean, as an undrafted free agent, he has a chance to make the roster, to make this roster. And the big question is, like, can Joshua Corbin, the Florida State running back, really make a difference? Can he make this roster as a running back? I mean, I think the Giants are going to look at a couple of undrafted running backs and trying to hopefully have one of them make it. But I would say the one player I really liked in the undrafted free agency period that they got was Jeremiah Hill. I'm trying to remember. I had him in a mock draft. I believe it was, if I'm honest, to the Jets. But Jeremiah Hill was a hybrid fullback tight end from Oklahoma, who I really like. Now, he's not an overly fast player, but what he brings as a fullback, which is unique, is he's got a really good set of hands. I mean, he scored 12 touchdowns for Oklahoma. I mean, he can catch out of the backfield. So you can line him up at fullback, you can line him up at tight end, and I believe that's what they're going to do. But they got an interesting piece that they can move around. Not an overly great blocker, but he's a fullback that you can make an impact with in the passing game, becomes an extra weapon down by the goal line, especially when defenses are so focused on the tight ends and the wide receivers. He'd be a nice player to just kind of sneak out of the backfield. You know what I'm talking about? Like on a play action where you have like the quarterback fake it to the handoff and you just have the fullback just kind of peter out into the corner of the end zone. Like he could be that could be a good play design for him. And I'm intrigued how they use him. I think he could be maybe even used as like a hybrid tight end, a little bit smaller. He's about 238 pounds, but he was a player I really liked. I actually thought he was going to be drafted. People really liked him at the Senior Bowl, but I thought he was a nice piece that they picked up. But look, I just feel like this draft to me felt like this was the foundation draft. This was pouring the concrete for what they're going to build upon. Like this is by nowhere near the finished product. And it feels like this draft is more about the future. And I know that sounds crazy because every draft's about the future, let's be honest. But this draft to me for the Giants felt like where this draft is supposed to help the next QB. It isn't designed to help Daniel Jones because they have a couple project offensive guards. This is going to be a young offensive line. It's really to me about the next quarterback of the Giants. It's like they got these foundation pieces. So next offseason, it will be about getting the quarterback and then with hopefully more cap space and with next year's draft, addressing the skill positions. They'll have an answer on Saquon. They'll have an answer on Kadarius Toney. They'll figure out what to do with Kenny Galladay, and then they will go from there to add those pieces. Because really, like, if they were like, the Giants can tell their fan base, they can tell us how much they believe in Daniel Jones. But on the surface, and the great thing for the Giants is they can sell it a little bit, that they're like, hey, yeah, we love Daniel Jones. Like, we got him, we got him a receiver in the second round. We upgraded the offensive line, and we invested a 7th overall pick in an offensive lineman. We got 2 guards. But it just felt to me like, if they were this desperate and they believed this vehemently in Daniel Jones, that they would have said, screw some of these defensive picks. We need to get weapons, and we need to show people and prove to people that he's our quarterback. But instead, the Giants they got a lot of good pieces to go forward. They got good building blocks. They have the foundation pieces. But the building isn't getting built till next season, because that is when they get the quarterback. That's when they will go after the quarterback that they want. That's when they will go after and try to get a quarterback and put the pieces around him. Because for Daniel Jones, like, ownership can say they believe in him. The front office can say that they believe in him. They can, they can keep telling me this. They keep saying, yeah, we believe in Daniel. We love Daniel. We think Daniel can be good. But to me, if you really, because this is really his last chance. If this front office was really that committed to him, they would have done everything in this draft to make sure it worked. And it just felt like, yeah, they got some nice pieces for him, but it just kind of felt like, yeah, it's more for the next guy. It's not really for Daniel. Like, Daniel's the holdover. Like, they've made a decision on Daniel. I mean, I look at like teams like the Jets, like, they know there's going to be a lot of pressure on Zach Wilson, but they went out of their way to draft a running back in the second round. Did they really need a running back in the second round? No, but they wanted to get as many playmakers for Zach, so they have an answer by the end of next season. I don't think the Giants are looking for an answer on Daniel Jones. I think they have their answer on Daniel Jones. And because I think ownership was stubborn to move off of him because of a weaker quarterback class, because of a lot of other factors, they made the decision like, look, this is our first year of our new regime. We can go into it. We can see what players we like this year. We'll reevaluate. This is really the first year of our process. And then we'll find the quarterback. We will look to answer the question quarterback next year. Whether it's free agency, whether it's draft. Like, look, even if I was the Giants, like, I know this would not be popular, but if Baker Mayfield even becomes a free agent, I would even take a shot on him just to see if it could maybe work. Because, like, I think, like, even at Baker, I think he's got a bit more upside right now than Daniel Jones. I don't think that's going to happen, but I mean, really, I just have this feeling that, look, the Giants, like, the ownership, I think, feels bad for Daniel Jones and wants to give him that one more shot. But this new regime coming in from Buffalo, I just think that they've made the decision already. The Giants are going to tell people, they're going to tell their fans that they have not made a decision on Daniel. They've made a decision. They didn't give him a 5th-year option. They're going to ride it out this year, and maybe it works out. Maybe Daniel Jones stays healthy 17 games. He proves everyone wrong, looks unbelievable. And then the Giants will say, like, hey, this is a good problem to have. But from what we've seen so far in his track record, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that is going to be what happens with Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones, I think there's already been an answer about Daniel Jones. Like, I think that this organization is going to move off from him. It's just not this year. It's next year. And this draft was about building the foundation. It was about getting this roster to a point next year where they're not desperate. This year, they were desperate for offensive linemen. They were desperate for it. Like, they needed, like, I'm almost surprised too, like, they didn't go and get more offensive line in the second and third round. Personally, like, That's what I would go. We'll try to get I like Trey Jergens. I thought he could be a good center guard for this team. There's a lot of good offensive linemen that second or third round range, and the one they picked, I think, was a reach. But if it works out, like even if one of those two guards just becomes a starter, not even a high end starter, but just a starter where you're not overly worried about, it was a good draft for the Giants. So there's a lot of questions about this draft. Overall, I give them a B plus. I think it was good, but this was basically the pouring the concrete draft. This was getting everything ready for next year when the big changes are going to happen, which I know Giant fans don't want to hear. I know Giant fans are frustrated. I get the frustration. I understand the frustration, but they've already made that decision on Daniel Jones. He's not their quarterback, and they are putting the pieces in place for the next Giants quarterback. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate the time. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're new to the channel. We will have more football content coming along the way, especially New York football. I know you love that content, but thank you as always for watching. Really appreciate the time. Thank you so much. Have a great day. And join us here again only on Rich Sports Talk.